Good Thursday morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Right now on Morning News Now. Excuse me. Deal or default? Concern is growing over the looming debt ceiling deadline. This morning, President Biden arrived in Japan on an abbreviated overseas trip, planning to head home early to keep negotiating. But the White House is still at odds with congressional Republicans over a deal to avert a potentially catastrophic default.
We're going to come together because there's no alternative to do the right thing for the country. And it would be catastrophic for the American economy and the American people if we didn't pay our bills.
We'll have the latest on where negotiations stand this morning, including why some Democrats are pushing the president to act without Congress. Also this morning, banned fallout in Florida after Governor Ron DeSantis signs a series of bills taking direct aim at the LGBTQ community. We'll take a closer look at what's in these controversial new laws and how they could make an impact beyond state lines. A close call for Prince Harry and his wife, Meghan. What we're learning this morning about a 2-hour car chase in New York involving the couple and the paparazzi. How they say it could have ended in a catastrophe and why it's drawing parallels to the chase that killed Princess Diana. And sharing her struggle from Disney to the darkest days that almost ended her life. Singer and actress Demi Lovato in a candid conversation about her journey toward loving herself. On this Mental Health Action Day, I'll share my conversation with the star turned activist, plus her message to those who may be struggling right now. So excited to bring you that conversation and to really lean in on Mental Health Action Day.
Exactly. We're going to dedicate a lot of this morning to that with a focus on the action that we can take.
We certainly are. We begin this morning, though, with some possibly hopeful signs in the ongoing standoff over raising the debt ceiling.
The president is in Japan this morning. He arrived earlier today and will take part in the G7 summit tomorrow. But he plans on cutting the trip short so he can get back to Washington over the weekend to continue negotiating a deal with congressional leaders. This is a positive sign that both sides are inching closer to an agreement, but time is running out. We are now just 2 weeks away from the U.S. potentially reaching the debt ceiling limit, forcing the country to default on its debts. Before he left, President Biden expressed confidence a deal will get done.
America is not a deadbeat nation. We pay our bills. The nation has never defaulted on its debt, and it never will. And we're going to continue these discussions with congressional leaders in the coming days until we reach an agreement.
NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli is traveling with the president. Joins us now from Hiroshima, Japan. Mike, good morning to you. So let's start with these debt ceiling negotiations. The president cutting his trip short. No Australia, no Papua New Guinea, so he can get back here to keep negotiating. Where do things stand right now when it comes to getting a deal done?
Well, Joe, it was clear yesterday that Tuesday's meeting between President Biden and congressional leadership went far better than that initial meeting the week before. You saw a little bit of a war of words between the president and Speaker McCarthy over the politics around this debt ceiling debate. But even the speaker yesterday was saying that he feels that the negotiations are in a much more serious place, faulting the president for taking some time to get there, of course. Now, the president himself, before making that very long journey here to Japan, clearly also wanted to leave on an optimistic note, but also a reminder about what's at stake here. Take a listen.
We're going to come together because there's no alternative to do the right thing for the country. We have to move on. And to be clear, this negotiation is about the outlines of what the budget will look like, not about whether or not we're going to, in fact, pay our debts. The leaders have all agreed we will not default. Every leader has said that. It would be catastrophic for the American economy and the American people if we didn't pay our bills.
Now, one of the reasons for this optimism around the talks is that both sides, especially Speaker McCarthy and the president, have really assigned and empowered some of their top lieutenants to enter into more serious negotiations while the president is overseas. Those meetings have already been happening multiple times a day. The real goal here is to ensure that there is somewhat of a framework of a deal before the president returns to Washington by Monday, potentially another meeting next week. Yes, we have about 2 weeks, but the time legislatively to get this done is really short, and that's why there's a real urgency around these talks right now, Joe.
Yeah, they can't really wait till May 31st to reach a deal. So, Mike, some Senate Democrats are circulating a draft of a letter. It urges the president to invoke the 14th Amendment to raise the debt ceiling. The president previously considered it, but concluded that would not solve this logjam. What is it fellow Democrats are saying here?
Yeah, we've been talking about this 14th Amendment option for some time. It really relies on a provision of that amendment that says the validity of the U.S. debt cannot be questioned. There's a belief that it gives the president really an end run around Congress to ensure that we do not default. Senate Democrats reminding the president of that option. And really what we heard from our Capitol Hill team talking to some of these Senate Democrats involved, it comes from that concern that as part of these negotiations with Republicans, the president might agree to things like work requirements for some federal programs. As Senator Bernie Sanders, obviously a lead progressive, says he will not accept a situation where we balance the nation's budget on the backs of the working class. He called that insane. Now, as a reminder, the president has said he believes there might be some legality to this option, but he thinks in the short term it's not really something he would consider, because if he were to take it, there would be an immediate constitutional challenge to it, which might only add to the uncertainty around this debt ceiling debate.
And Mike, I'm sure you were super excited to travel all the way to Japan just so you can talk more about the debt ceiling. So we should ask you why you are in Japan, the G7 summit taking place. So tell us what's on the president's agenda during this trip.
Well, Joe, obviously the concerns at home are here for all of us, including the president and those covering him. But really, when you talk about the president's foreign policy, he's really framed it, said the 21st century is this battle between autocracies like Russia and China and democracies. And this summit that the president is attending is a perfect example. There's going to be a very clear focus in the early days on the war in Ukraine, the fact that there's been broad support among the U.S. allies, not just in Europe, but from countries like the host country here, Japan, to support Ukraine really is a source of great pride for the president. The leaders tomorrow are actually going to be visiting that atomic bomb memorial, a real reminder of what's at stake as Russia has deployed some of their nuclear weapons potentially in theater. But there's also obviously a significant focus on China as it has worked to expand its influence, not just in the region, but throughout the world over the last decade. And that's what we saw today as President Biden sat down with the Japanese prime minister. That relationship, not just economically, but over national security, has really deepened over the last few years. It's been a linchpin to U.S. efforts to curb China's growing influence. And we'll hear a lot from the leaders in the coming days about really work not just among their alliance, but within the developing world to try to edge out China here. Joe.
So many important issues to discuss. Mike Memoli in Japan. Mike, thank you.
Well, this morning, the future of disgraced Congressman George Santos remains up in the air. The House voted yesterday to refer a Democratic-sponsored resolution to kick Santos out of Congress to the House Ethics Committee. The referral was approved in a vote along party lines, 221 to 204. Well, after the vote, Santos said he believed the chamber made the right decision, and he intends to let the process play out.
I have not done my job since I've gotten here. I can chew and walk gum at the same time. I can chew gum and walk at the same time. I have not been convicted of any crime. You insist in saying that. I will have my day to defend myself.
NBC News congressional correspondent Julie Sirkin joins us now with more on this. Hey, Julie, good morning. So the House voted to refer the resolution to kick Santos out of Congress to the House Ethics Committee. Explain what happens next.
Yeah, good morning, Savannah. So the Ethics Committee is a bipartisan panel. It's led by Democrat Susan Wild and Republican David Joyce of Ohio. And this panel has already been looking into all of the allegations against Congressman George Santos since early March. So that's one of the arguments that Democrats, especially those that supported that original resolution to expel Santos from Congress, that's the argument they have made, that the ethics panel has already been looking into this. Referring this resolution to the panel won't do much to speed up that process or add to what the ethics panel is already looking into, but that's basically where it's going to sit for an X amount of time. That panel tends to operate very much behind closed doors. They don't really have an open dialogue with the public or the press into what they're doing and what they're investigating, but they're also looking into other allegations, other lies that Santos has told, including allegedly an improper sexual relationship with one of his former staffers. That was referred to the panel as well, while all of these outside investigations play out.
Julie, also, our viewers probably remember just last week, Santos pleaded not guilty to 13 criminal charges. It included fraud, money laundering, a bunch of other crimes. He's already said he's running for re-election. There is no law, no precedent that says a member of Congress can't continue to serve while indicted or even convicted. So if he's not planning to resign, he's already talking about re-election. This is really up to the Ethics Committee to decide his future in Congress. Is that right?
Well, kind of. And the Ethics Committee investigation into Santos can take longer than the 2 years that he's going to serve in Congress. So you're right. Technically, if that investigation is still happening, all of these outside investigations, including the one where he was indicted in New York, is still in the process of going on. Technically, nothing is stopping Santos from running again. But remember, he did win in a district where Biden won in 2020, so it is traditionally a Democrat district. And on top of that, the leader of his Republican Party, Speaker McCarthy in the House, already said that he's not going to support a Santos reelection bid. Here, though, is some reaction from Democrats, including a freshman Democrat from New York. Watch.
It is a cop-out, and that at the end of the day, it is a way of avoiding the accountability on this expulsion motion.
And we should not refer this matter to the Ethics Committee. This resolution is already there. Now, every Republican should stand up and join us to defend this body and expel George Santos.
Now, I will say Democrats and Republicans, for that matter, including those 5 freshman Republicans that are Santos's colleagues that have called for him to resign but supported this move to move this resolution to expel Santos to the Ethics Committee. This can all build pressure on Speaker McCarthy, who really has the final say of what happens to Santos and his here.
All right, Julie Sirkin, thank you so much.
Turning now to the ongoing bans affecting the LGBTQ plus community in red states. Yesterday, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed 4 bills that took aim at the transgender community, drag performances, and discussions of sexual orientation and gender identity in the classroom.
Activists say the introduction of these 4 bills is the largest slate of anti-LGBTQ bills in one legislative session that Florida has ever seen. DeSantis had this to say about the bills.
We're protecting kids. And we're going to protect kids when it's popular. We'll protect kids even when you take some incoming as a result of maybe offending some ideologies or some agendas out there, but that's fine.
NBC Out reporter Joe Yerkeba is here with more on all this. Joe, thank you for joining us. You covered this extensively. Let's start with 2 of the bills that are really focused on minors. One would ban really gender-affirming care for transgender kids. The other one is an expansion of what critics call the Don't Say Gay law, really restricting discussions of sexual orientation, gender identity in the classroom. Tell us more about what we should know about these bills and what happens if someone violates these new laws.
Sure. So under current law, the so-called Don't Say Gay law, it prohibits instruction on sexual orientation and gender identity in K through 3rd grades. So this new law is going to expand that through 8th grade, but it also is going to put restrictions on reproductive health education in 6th through 12th grade, and it's going to say you can only do that in a way that's age or developmentally appropriate. And then so there's, if a teacher were to violate that law, they could potentially lose their license, or a parent could sue their school district. The other new bill is the one that would ban gender-affirming care for minors, and it's really the most extreme that we've seen in the country so far, according to advocates, because it would allow Florida to take custody of children whose parents provide them with gender-affirming care, even if those families, for example, are just visiting Florida from out of state, so they provide their kids with care in other states. So it's really unprecedented, and if a provider violates that law, they could face up to 5 years in prison.
Also, I understand 2 other bills take aim at transgender people as well, and drag performances. What do we need to know about those ones?
Right. So Florida is now the only state in the country that bars trans people from using public facilities that align with their gender identities, basically in any publicly funded area. So a government-owned building, schools, colleges, and they're the only state in the nation to do that. Other states have similar laws, but they're much more restricted. They also now have one of these restrictions on drag performances, even though the bill doesn't specifically say anything about drag. DeSantis said in his press conference yesterday that it was specifically intended to restrict drag performances.
And that is, of course, a huge issue right now. It's getting a lot of debate, got a lot of attention in Tennessee as well. Let's switch gears to Texas, because Texas right now has a bill that's heading to the desk of Governor Greg Abbott. This one also bans gender-affirming care for transgender minors. Talk more about this one and what are the implications here?
Sure, yeah. So the bill would restrict trans care for minors, and this is a bill that the state has been pursuing for years now. So if Abbott does sign it, then it's going to, have a really big effect on the community. And parents have told me that it's important to know that in other states that have passed these bills, judges have blocked them from taking effect. But the problem is that usually providers preemptively stop providing care anyway. So I've heard from a number of families in Texas who plan to leave the state even if the law is blocked from taking effect.
We should know pretty much everything we've discussed here. There's a legal challenge and all these issues are pending in court, right?
Right, exactly. And parents have actually already preemptively filed a legal challenge in Florida to block that law.
All right, Joe Yerkeba, we appreciate your reporting. Thanks for joining us.
Good to have you on set.
One of the world's most famous couples, Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, you've probably heard of them. They were involved in a pursuit by photographers in New York City on Tuesday. Now, a spokesperson for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex alleges that the two were part of a dangerous 2-hour car chase, saying they were pursued by highly aggressive paparazzi that resulted in multiple near collisions.
Well, law enforcement has pushed back against some of those characterizations, describing Tuesday's incident as a little less harrowing. NBC News national correspondent Gabe Gutierrez has more.
A spokesperson for Prince Harry and his wife Meghan says that this pursuit was near catastrophic. The NYPD won't go that far, but now we're hearing from a cab driver who drove the famous couple for at least part of the night. Prince Harry and his wife Meghan Markle seen here leaving a charity event in New York. And there appear to be differing accounts about what happened next. A spokesperson for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex admonishing photographers for a relentless pursuit that lasted 2 hours and resulted in multiple near collisions involving other drivers on the road, pedestrians, and 2 NYPD officers. Adding, the near catastrophic car chase came at the hands of a ring of highly aggressive paparazzi.
The briefing I received, 2 of our officers could have been injured. I thought that was a bit reckless and irresponsible.
Though at least 3 law enforcement sources tell NBC News the couple was followed, not chased, and that the incident was a bit chaotic, not near catastrophic.
I would find it hard to believe that there was a 2-hour high-speed chase.
In a written statement, the NYPD says numerous photographers made the couple's transport challenging, but there were no reported collisions, injuries, or arrests. Harry and Meghan had private security as they left this venue, and 2 law enforcement sources tell NBC News that they wanted to return to Manhattan's Upper East Side, where they were staying with a friend, and did not want the paparazzi to follow. So the law enforcement sources say the couple was driven up and down Manhattan for more than an hour with a police escort. Then the pair was taken to this police precinct where a taxi picked them up. Would you describe it as chaotic?
Yeah, chaotic. You could say chaotic.
But
yeah. With me, I don't know what happened previous in the day, right? With me, it was chaotic, but not crazy, right?
Do you think the paparazzi went too far?
I don't know. When we were there, they kept their distance when they were following us in my cab.
Sonny Singh told us he's the taxi driver who picked up the couple, but he says they drove around for only 10 minutes before the street was blocked by a garbage truck.
People just came out of nowhere with cameras and started snapping pictures.
Did they seem worried?
They seem worried. They seem worried and nervous as well.
He then says he dropped them back off at the police precinct, where a different car eventually took them home. Prince Harry, of course, has railed against the paparazzi for much of his life, accusing them of invading his privacy.
I had to do everything I could to protect my family.
Though critics say Harry and Meghan also court the cameras and publicity, pointing to their Netflix docuseries.
No one sees what's happening behind closed doors.
It was 26 years ago this summer that his mother, Princess Diana, died during a car chase in Paris.
We would get followed, photographed, chased, harassed. The clicking of cameras and the flashes of cameras makes my blood boil. It makes me angry. It takes me back to what happened to my mum and what I experienced when I was a kid.
A source close to Harry and Meghan says that there is security video that captured the incident. It has not yet been publicly released. Back to you.
All right, Gabe Gutierrez, thank you so much. Now let's get a look at your morning news now. Weather.
Meteorologist Michelle Grossman is with us this morning with the forecast. Michelle, good morning.
Good morning to you both. And it's cold this morning. You need the layers as you head out. Even the winter coats in spots. We start out with temperatures at or below freezing in many spots from the Midwest to the Northeast. And we have frost advisories, freeze warnings in place. And we're looking at temperatures cool as we go throughout the day, the rest of this Thursday. Temperatures well below average. New York City today just 64 degrees. But we're going to have a lot of sunshine, dry conditions. It's going to feel a little bit like fall. 70 in D.C., 73 in Greensboro, and just 59 in Portland. That is 4 degrees below what is typical for this time of year. We'll keep it cool once again tomorrow, but notice this warm air is working in parts of the Ohio Valley, also the Midwest. So Philadelphia still below average tomorrow, just 72. That's 2 degrees below average. Boston, you're going to be chilly too, just temperatures in the 60s. But then we begin to moderate as we go throughout the rest of the weekend. Starting out Saturday, in most spots, we're looking at cooler conditions below normal. And then by Sunday and Monday, we're back to summer-like temperatures In Pittsburgh, near 80 degrees on Monday. Richmond, you're going to be at 80 degrees on Monday. And then to the mid-80s in Charlotte. So that's on the East Coast. The West Coast, we're talking about really warm conditions. 85 in Portland, that's 17 degrees above what is typical for this time of year. Into the 90s in Medford, Reading, Sacramento. We're looking at 84 in Boise, well above average for this time of year. We'll keep that heat in place today. Also tomorrow, we've had this heat in place for quite a bit. So not a lot of air conditioning out west. It's going to take its toll as we head throughout the next several days. Spokane, we're looking at 90 on Saturday. Boise into the low 90s Saturday and Sunday. So on the East Coast, we're cool. On the West Coast, we're looking at really warm temperatures. In between here, we're looking at a cold front that's swinging through. So ahead of this cold front and along this cold front, we're looking at the chance for showers. Could see some heavy rain and also the chance for some really strong storms, especially in portions of the southern plains. Specifically, we're looking at Oklahoma into Texas, down to portions of the southeast. We have another front moving through. So we're watching a couple fronts here, and that's going to bring the chance for heavy rain. Notice along the Gulf Coast into portions of the Carolinas, the southeast. We're looking at reds, oranges, yellows. That's indicating where we're seeing that heavy rain. Here is the setup. There's that cold front in portions of the central plains. That's going to bring the chance for showers, even heavy rain along that front. High rainfall rates along that front as well. We're going to see this continuing today, then moving off to the east tomorrow. Back to you both.
All right, Michelle, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Coming up on Morning News now, tension in the Middle East as Israeli nationalists mark 56 years since the capture of Jerusalem. We're going to take you to the Old City, where officials and protesters are bracing for the possibility of violence.
And overnight attacks in Ukraine's capital, what officials are saying about dozens of missiles launched in Kyiv. Next on Morning News Now.
This morning, officials in Israel are bracing for the possibility of violent clashes. Tens of thousands of Israeli nationalists are preparing to march through the Muslim quarter of Jerusalem's Old City.
This is an annual parade marking Israel's capture of Jerusalem in the 1967 war. But this year it comes amid heightened tensions. NBC News foreign correspondent Raf Sanchez joins us now from Jerusalem with the very latest. Raf, we understand you're in a pretty active scene there, so please stay safe as we're talking to you. Let us know if you need to hop. But the parades are expected to begin shortly. Tell us what the mood is like there. What do you expect to see?
Well, Savannah, good morning. I just want to turn our camera around so you can see there's starting to be scuffles here already. We are inside the Damascus gate of Jerusalem's Old City. And what you're seeing here are Israeli police, and they are, I don't know if clashing is the right word, but they're scuffling with young Israeli marchers. And this is kind of the calm before the storm, because over the next couple of hours, you are going to see tens of thousands of these marchers making their way through the Old City down to the Western Wall. Now, these Israeli marchers, this is a day of celebration. They are commemorating their victory in the 1967 war when Israel took full control of Jerusalem. You can see their police walking through our shot. But for Palestinians, this is a day of humiliation and, in many cases, fear. A lot of Palestinian businesses have been closed. You can see the police are all around. We're okay here. It's a little chaotic, but we're okay. So this is just the beginning. This is going to get a whole lot more intense over the coming hours. And the question is, how bad will it get?
And Raf, of course, is reporting live right now with using cell phone technologies. It's why the shot might cut out here and there, but we can still hear him and see most of what he's talking about. And Raf, we should note, as you've reported, a ceasefire was just reached between Palestinian Islamic Jihad and Israel on Saturday. That followed several deadly clashes last week. Are officials worried that this could jeopardize that?
Yeah, they are, Joe. At this event 2 years ago, Hamas fired rockets from Gaza in response to what was happening here in Jerusalem, and it triggered an 11-day conflict between the Israeli military and militants in Gaza. So there is a lot of concern that there could be a repeat of that. We have just finished 5 days of intense fighting in Gaza, so the hope is that both sides are kind of exhausted, that nobody wants to go back to conflict now. But this is one of the most combustible days in one of the most combustible cities on earth. So we will see what happens in the coming hours, Jeff.
All right, Raf Sanchez, a true pro in the middle of it to tell us what we need to know. Raf, stay safe. Thank you so much.
Now to more headlines from around the world this morning, starting with a barrage of missile attacks overnight in Ukraine.
NBC News correspondent Josh Letterman joins us now with more on this. Hey, Josh, good morning.
Hey, good morning. Ukraine's Air Force says that it successfully shot down 29 out of the 30 missiles that Russia launched overnight in what was the 9th Russian attack on the capital of Kyiv just this month. And it comes as Russia's military is bracing for a long-planned Ukrainian counteroffensive to try to take back territory seized earlier in the invasion. And now Ukraine is pushing back on Russia's claims that it destroyed a Patriot air defense system provided to Ukraine by the U.S., saying it was damaged but is now back to being fully functional. And now to Italy, where 9 people rescued by a helicopter after their homes were flooded by massive rains. Authorities say at least 8 people were killed in the torrential rains as well as landslides, with thousands more who had to be evacuated. The rescue has been going on now for more than 24 hours, with many older people rescued by police in boats. And if you think that you get bad jet lag when you fly, check out this British adventurer. He may have you beat. His name is Jamie McDonald, and he's just set a Guinness World Record for visiting all 7 wonders of the world in 1 week. Now, he started the trip at the Great Wall of China, crisscrossed through Asia, the Middle East, Europe, even South America, before ending at Mexico's Chichen Itza. And it involved 13 flights, 16 taxis, 9 buses, and 4 trains, and that was all in less than 7 days. Back to you.
I hope he was able to enjoy some of those, at least for a little bit.
I know. Interesting. Yeah, you want to spend some time, but I mean,
busy
pretty cool.
trip.
All right, Josh, thank you so much.
Coming up, from Disney star to mental health advocate.
Even to this day, no matter how happy I might feel and seem, I'm human.
Singer and actress Demi Lovato is opening up about her darkest moments and how they led her to where she is today. My conversation with her, plus more on this Mental Health Action Day. This is Morning News Now.
Today is Mental Health Action Day. It is a day to encourage and empower people to take action about the mental health crisis that our country is facing. It is a topic that is close to our hearts here on Morning News Now. So this morning, we are dedicating part of each hour to these important discussions, hearing from experts and providing important resources if you or someone you know is struggling with mental health issues.
Well, one person who feels particularly passionate about mental health and advocating for it is actress and singer Demi Lovato. She has battled drug addiction and eating disorder and struggled with her mental health. Well, I spoke with Lovato recently at the Milken Institute Global Conference about her journey and the pressures our younger generation faces and why it is so important to speak out about it. Here's some of our conversation.
I found something that I deal with now is anxiety. I've dealt with depression, I've dealt with addiction, I've kind of have a checklist, and I've just kind of knocked them all off.
Global superstar Demi Lovato does not shy away from sharing her darkest moments.
There have been times where I've dealt with depression where I have had suicidal ideations, and it's something that I've struggled with since I was very young. And it's something that I can still struggle with if I don't stay on top of it.
Lovato made headlines in July 2018 when a drug overdose nearly took her life. She shared the previously unknown details in a YouTube documentary, revealing just how close to death she came.
I had 3 strokes. I had a heart attack.
Was that a hard decision to make, to be that open?
It wasn't a hard decision for me because I've always been an open book. The very first time that I went to treatment was when I was 18, and I went for my eating disorder, and I went for self-harm and emotional issues. And when I came out of that experience, I was faced with the decision of either keep your mouth shut and not say anything, or share your experience, strength, and hope with another person in hopes that it affects them in a positive way. And I decided to go with that route because I wanted to help others. I wish that I had had somebody when I was 13 years old. I wanted somebody in the public eye to say that, hey, this is what I've gone through, and you don't have to choose that route.
What do you want the 13-year-old who's watching you now to know about if they're not okay?
Talking to people and asking for help is more than okay and is absolutely what you should do.
For Lovato, limiting her social media intake was key.
It got to a point where I realized I can't read anything, because if I read positive comments, it feeds my ego. And if I read negative comments, it damages my ego. And ultimately, I don't want to navigate out of ego at all.
What would it be like for you, do you think, if when you first started struggling, you had the internet the way we do at our fingertips now? And how damaging do you think it is?
I think it's so damaging. I think that we live in a world of editing and Facetune and all these things that can change the way that we look. And it's hard to grow up in a world where that's right in front of your face and at your fingertips at all times. I grew up in a period of time where young Hollywood was very, very, very thin, and that was the look. I think that had a really negative impact on my mental health, which I think fed into my eating disorder.
Today, Lovato is focused on strengthening her mental health and pointing others to that path by being transparent and putting in the work.
I don't want to paint the facade that everything is totally perfect and fine, but I am in a really good place, and it has been kind of challenging to write a happy rock album. But I'm doing it. But I have bad days. I had a bad day on Sunday. I realized that even to this day, no matter how happy I might feel and seem, I'm human. And it's okay to still struggle, even when you're in a great place.
Is this as important a part of your life as the other things that we know you for, being an advocate in this way?
It's arguably even more important because music, yes, it can last forever, but careers don't. Life and legacy is what's important, but the things that I'm most proud of are the fans that share their stories with me and say, "You've saved my life." And that to me is more important than any award that I could win.
I just love hearing her talk about the fact that it is more important to her, more valuable to share that truth than it is to put out music. Well, here to continue this conversation, which is so important, is our friend, you probably recognize her, Sophie Barron. She's the founder and CEO of The Conversationalist. That is a nonpartisan platform empowering the next generation to use their voices and unify through conversation, which of course includes a discussion about mental health. Sophie, it's always so good to have you. Thank you for joining us on Happy Mental Health Action Day.
Thank you so much, and thank you for hosting these important conversations.
Oh my goodness, absolutely. We love to do it here. So I want to start with the big picture and some stats. 42% of high school students saying they persistently feel sad or hopeless. 22% seriously considering suicide. Both of those numbers jump dramatically when we talk about just girls. Big picture, what is Gen Z dealing with? Why is it so tough right now?
We need to think about the world that Gen Z is inheriting, from political polarization to the climate crisis to systemic racism and so much more. Gen Z is having a harder time dealing with the stress of current events than older generations, which the APA found. And in addition to that, as Gen Z enters the workforce, 78% of Gen Zers, from a study from Indeed, found that 78% of Gen Zers are currently struggling with burnout. So when we take a big picture look at what this generation is experiencing, it's important to remember that we have to have some empathy because they didn't create this world that they are inheriting, and we have to center their voices in these conversations.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, in the conversations that I've had, the list of things that Gen Z tells me they literally wake up thinking about or keep them up at night. Climate change, the genuine fear of a shooting at their school, eating disorders, and the pressure to look a certain way. All of those things also, right, get exacerbated by social media, whether that's the constant body image in your face that creates those issues, or whether it's just that constant information loop. How much do you think social media plays a role here?
As a generation that is extremely online, I think everything you just mentioned is a huge reason as to why Gen Z has been reported to be a generation most likely to struggle with their mental health. But I do want to offer something positive, which is that because of so much of these conversations happening online, Gen Z has made this conversation about mental health mainstream. And because of that, there have been amazing strides in normalizing this conversation. However, with that, on social media came the rise of therapy speak. And I'm guilty of this. This is when we take experiences that we learn in therapy, oftentimes these large, lofty clinical terms like boundaries and trauma dumping, generational trauma, and we make those terms our everyday speak. And this also leads to a trend in self-diagnosis through watching people talk about these issues on social media, which is why it's important for us to make these conversations accessible and make sure that what we're talking about doesn't alienate people from the conversation.
So let's talk about what can help and how to have those conversations. In the reporting that I've done, the term trusted adult comes up a lot. I don't love that term. I think it feels a little clunky. I think it feels sort of clunky for a young person to think about that. But the idea, you know, that gaining some perspective, having that conversation, and making sure that someone knows if you're feeling a certain way. How important is that, and how much of a game changer is it?
This is why I started The Conversationalist. And we had a recent episode of our talk show, POVs, where we sat down with amazing Gen Zers to discuss whether everyone should be in therapy. And by really listening to their unique experiences, we identified that maybe they have different action plans or solutions in mind to address this mental health crisis, but there was a lot of common ground through that sharing of experiences. So while it may feel anxiety-provoking to sit down and have that hard conversation, the more we have them, the more we're able to identify that common ground, which gives us a pathway forward.
Do you think the stigma around mental health or around seeking therapy or around taking medication, if that's what a doctor recommends for you, is being lifted and eased with Gen Z?
I absolutely do. And Gen Zers think that themselves, which is why we have to listen to them in these conversations. These issues hit so close to home. So the more we talk about Gen Z, we need to be pulling up a chair to that table and listening to why they feel this way. Because the more empathy and understanding we can lend to this generation, the more we're able to address Gen Zers individually while also acknowledging that there is this collective struggle. And data shows that in addition to being the most isolated, the most depressed, the most anxious generation, there are studies from the APA that found that Gen Z is most likely to report their mental health concerns and want to open up these conversations. So let's start them. Find a way to have that conversation and put young people at the forefront of that.
Absolutely. And for parents at home watching, it's so important that you recognize the need to be talking about this and not put that pressure or stigma on your children. Sophie Barron, thank you so much. It's always wonderful to have you. Thanks for helping us kick off our Mental Health Action Day coverage. Good to see you.
Thank you.
Let's keep the conversation going. We are joined now by Dr. Christine Yu. She is the Chief Medical Officer at the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. Doctor, good to have you with us. So I want to start with the 2021 survey from the CDC found 22% of high school students had seriously considered suicide. We know girls are especially susceptible. What can we do? What are the main things we need to focus on to address the struggles with mental health that so many young people are dealing with?
Thanks so much for opening up this dialogue and giving your listeners this great moment to reflect on mental health. It's been clear that it's important to so many more Americans these days, certainly coming through the pandemic. And I think for parents and young people to realize that we need to kind of move away from becoming overwhelmed by all of the issues going on in the world, you know, doom scrolling and just that almost perseveration on those issues is not helpful. It comes down to the basics, our relationships, our self-care. It's normal to struggle. That's a human part of the human condition. And I think for parents to realize, and all people, that it's not a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of strength when we can talk about it, and certainly seeking mental health treatment can be an important part of that equation as well.
Your organization helped out with a Harris poll. It found at least 3/4 of adults in the U.S. say that most people who die by suicide usually show some signs beforehand. What are the signs that we should be looking out for?
You know, the way that I think about this is that any sign of behavior change is a sign that something may be stressing a person. It, of course, doesn't mean that their mental health is in a crisis level state or that they're necessarily suicidal, but it certainly does not hurt to open up a caring dialogue. We just heard about the presence of a trusted adult, but really it can be peer-to-peer, teachers, coaches, any number of individuals can open up a dialogue where the conversation is really around, tell me more about what it is you're experiencing. I want to be there for you, and there's no judgment. Really shifting, in fact, towards a growth mindset rather than perfection. So it's progress over perfection, and opening up that dialogue. And do not be afraid to ask if a person is having thoughts of ending their life, if they sound like they may be hopeless, overwhelmed, feeling trapped, or like they feel like a burden. And they won't necessarily use those words. So it's tone of voice, it's the way that a person may hint around those issues, but certainly behavior change as well in their life. Eating, sleeping differences, withdrawing from activities, becoming angry, using substances more, all of those can be definitely warning signs.
I want to ask you more about what we do to address that, because that same study we mentioned, it found 2 out of 3 adults believe they don't have enough knowledge to tell if someone is considering suicide. That is a tough conversation to have. But if you are going to sit down with someone, you're worried about them, how do you approach that conversation? What are the resources out there that can help you out?
Yes, this is a different skill set. We ask each other every day, how are you doing? But, this type of conversation, you have to set it up a little differently. Set it up in private. Let the person know that you're opening up this conversation simply and only because you want to be more of a support to them, that there is no judgment involved. Really setting it up in that safe way will help. And then again, the way that I do it is I set it up so that I'm not, coming at it straight into asking about suicidal thoughts. I'm really hoping that they will have the opportunity to open up about what they are going through, what they are experiencing. That is a gift. If they start doing that, you can say, thank you for trusting me. Thank you for sharing. Practice active listening skills. That means just asking, tell me more about that. When did that start? How does that feel to you? All the normal things that hopefully we do around other issues if a friend or a family member is dealing with. Now, remember, suicide and mental health, at the end of the day, they're complex, but they are health issues. And so just like you would around any other, if they told you about physical health issues or another thing they're going through, you would handle it with care, but you would not back away and you would not overreact either. So if somebody tells you that they're having thoughts of ending their life, you keep the conversation going. You ask them more. And remember that 988 is the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, available to anyone who is struggling or if you are helping someone. And at AFSP, the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, we have tips and guidance for how to have this kind of dialogue at afsp.org. We even have a new ad campaign called Talk Away the Dark that really gets into how to have these conversations.
Vital information. Dr. Christine Moutier, thanks so much for joining us. And I want to reiterate that number you just mentioned because it's so important. If you or anyone you know is struggling, you can call or text the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988.
Such a good reminder that that's also for people helping someone as well. Coming up, shelling out less for a breakfast staple.
When we come back here on Morning News Now, some excellent news. We'll explain what's behind a sudden drop in the price of eggs.
Everyone just laughed.
After a nationwide shortage. Back now with some financial headlines, including a major settlement deal for the victims of Jeffrey Epstein.
CNBC's Pippa Stevens joins us on all this. Good morning, Pippa.
Hey, Savannah. Well, Deutsche Bank has agreed to pay $75 million to settle a lawsuit by women who say they were abused by the late Jeffrey Epstein. The proposed class action also accused the German bank of facilitating his sex trafficking. Epstein had been a client of Deutsche Bank from 2013 to 2018. It's unclear how this settlement may impact JP Morgan Chase, which faces similar but larger lawsuits by Epstein's victims and the U.S. Virgin Islands, where he had a home. Meantime, Target says organized retail crime will cost the company more than $1 billion this year. That's $500 million more in stolen and lost merchandise than a year ago. Target's CEO calling out the challenge during the company's earnings call yesterday. He says Target and other retail chains are dealing with rising theft on top of slower sales and shoppers becoming more price sensitive. And Americans are spending less time on Twitter since Elon Musk took over. New data from Pew Research shows the majority of Twitter users have taken a break from the platform over the last year, and many of the site's most active users are tweeting less often. The stats suggest engagement on Twitter has declined since Musk bought the company in October. That is notable because the vast majority of users are so-called lurkers and not posters. Roughly 20% of Twitter users send 98% of all tweets. Joe and Savannah,
I feel like we can give them a better name than lurkers, like news connoisseurs or something like that.
Like Bush or something.
Right?
Yeah.
Thanks, Pip. I appreciate it.
Thanks. Well, now, this should have been a Joe Reed. Now to some excellent news. Wholesale egg prices are finally dropping. Just a few months ago, it was nearly impossible to find a carton of eggs under $4, while NBC News business and data reporter Brian Chung breaks it all down.
After an eye-popping rise in egg prices earlier in the year, Humpty Dumpty is now having a great fall. The average nationwide retail price for a dozen eggs now at $3.27. That's down from an all-time peak of $4.82 back in January. Why? Supply and demand now tilting in the favor of consumers.
Part of the reason why we got to such high prices had to do with high-path avian influenza.
That's right, the deadly bird flu, now starting to get under control. Sick birds led to low supply in December, the time of year when demand for eggs is highest. In the winter, the U.S. had about 308 million hens laying eggs, 20 million less than a year before. Cal-Maine Foods, the country's largest egg producer, commanding 20% of the retail egg market, sharply raised prices. Its profits grew more than 700% in the last quarter. Those profits ruffled feathers on Capitol Hill, with Democrats like Senator Elizabeth Warren and Congresswoman Katie Porter accusing them of price gouging. Cal-Maine's response, it does not directly set retail egg prices. But the worst of the bird flu appears to be over. The hen population is growing again, moving back up to 314 million in March. So supplies back in order. All while demand wanes.
We're almost a week after Mother's Day, moving into Memorial Day, which, then comes into your grilling season.
With the holidays over and school about to break, the peak time for baking and eating breakfast at home is fading, which could all lead to deals at the grocery store.
My guess is see it another several percentage points down, maybe closer to a $2.99 or $2.75 situation, depending on what kind of promotions we see throughout the retail channels.
Well, our thanks to Brian Chung for that report. According to the USDA, there have been no new bird flu cases detected at commercial egg farms since December 20th.
Coming up, deals and steals for fun in the sun.
If you are planning a summer getaway, this is for you. After the break, how you can take a trip without breaking the bank. That's some good news. You're watching Morning News Now.
We're back now with some sad news from the world of professional wrestling. Hall of Famer Billy Graham, also known as Superstar Billy Graham, has passed away. He was known in the WWE for his tagline, "The man of the hour, the man with the power, too sweet to be sour." I didn't know that one.
Oh, that's cute.
Graham sold out arenas while inspiring others with his flair and confidence. His family says Graham had been in the hospital for more than 4 months for various health reasons. WWE released a statement saying, quote, Graham's flashy fashion style, over-the-top interviews, and bodybuilder physique created the archetype for a generation of superstars that followed in his footsteps. Superstar Billy Graham was 79. He really was sort of the predecessor to Hulk Hogan. He actually used to be a bodybuilder with Arnold Schwarzenegger back in the day, long before they were really well known.
That is very cool, and also I love any opportunity where you get to show off your WWE knowledge.
It's useful knowledge, I'm telling you.
It's just the little gems. All right, well, if you're like most Americans, you're probably planning your summer vacation getaway right now. Hopefully, maybe you already did, because everything comes with a big price tag right now.
Yeah, if you're trying to do it now, sorry. All right, that forces many people to cut back on their travel plans. According to Bankrate, 81% of people making more than $100,000 a year are likely to take summer vacations. That is compared to just 54% of people who make less than $50,000.
Well, Hopper's lead economist, Haley Berg, joins us now on set to talk through these prices, tell us maybe, hopefully, how we can still snag a deal, which is where we're going to start. So how is the average American going to do this summer? Take a trip. Where are they heading? How are people able to find some deals?
It's incredible. Airfares domestic averaging about $300 per ticket. International up 30 to 60%. Hundreds of dollars more per ticket. But what we're hearing overwhelmingly is that travelers still want to take those vacations. About 84% plan to spend the same or more on travel than they did pre-pandemic.
So, I mean, how do this year's prices compare with last year's prices? Because we know people are still traveling. A lot of them are putting it on their credit card. So how is inflation impacting that and their ability to pay it off?
Well, we're seeing domestic prices are down versus last summer, which is great news, down about $75 per ticket. And that's because they were so extraordinarily high last year.
Right, okay.
On the international front, where demand has opened up as countries have reopened, this is the first full summer of travel, prices are incredibly high. We are still seeing travelers spending $1,300 to $1,800 on tickets to Europe and Asia. But many of them are starting to do very deal-seeking behaviors to lower that total price, whether it's booking midweek trips, flying later in the summer when prices are cheaper. Travelers are doing whatever they can to fit it in the budget.
6 a.m. Tuesday flight.
Give us some more of those types of tips. Like if you are needing to book still, what are the things that you should kind of try on some of those sites?
Well, a 6 a.m. Tuesday flight will actually save you both time and money. You're significantly less likely to be delayed or canceled if you take the first flight of the day before 8 a.m. So it can save you on extra hotel nights, new ticket.
Yep.
But flying midweek can save you big time. Domestic flights anywhere from $50 to upwards of $100 per ticket. International flights upwards of $200 per ticket just by flying midweek. If you can go September and October, that's how you'll save the most, about 30% off peak summer prices just by going in the fall.
Looking ahead, I already noticed that.
Beautiful weather.
Gorgeous
weather.
Yeah. Haley Berg, thank you so much. Good tips.
That does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news continues right now. Stick with us. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us this Thursday. I'm Savannah Sellers.
And I'm Joe Fryer. Right now on Morning News Now, deal or no deal? Overnight, President Biden arrived in Japan for an abridged trip to the G7 summit. Back home, there is cautious optimism that a debt ceiling deal can be reached. The White House and top lawmakers on Capitol Hill are reportedly close to compromise.
We're going to come together because there's no alternative to do the right thing for the country. We have to move on.
We've got team coverage across the globe this morning with the latest on those negotiations and what a potential default could mean for you. Ticking clock, a major setback for TikTok this morning. Montana becomes the first state to outright ban the social media app. We're going to take a closer look at what exactly this ban does and the legal challenges it is already facing. Also this morning, chaotic pursuit. The spokesperson for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle say they were involved in, quote, a near catastrophic car chase with paparazzi that lasted 2 hours. We'll tell you why the NYPD's account of the incident is a little more nuanced. And opening our eyes. Today is Mental Health Action Day. Later in the hour, we're going to focus on the well-being of the LGBTQ plus community. With Pride Month now 2 weeks away, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and other state governments around the country are green-lighting more laws that limit LGBTQ rights. We're going to look at the impact that even some of those political discussions are having on our mental health and the best ways to take action.
We are going big on Mental Health Action Day.
Already
I'm so grateful to have this platform to do so and start this conversation with all of you at home.
Exactly. We're going to start this hour with White House officials and congressional leaders scrambling to reach a deal to end the debt ceiling standoff.
President Biden is in Japan this morning for the G7 summit, but negotiations are ongoing back in Washington to avoid a potential first ever default that could happen as soon as June 1st. But before leaving for Asia, the president expressed confidence a deal will be reached. NBC News senior congressional correspondent Garrett Haake has the latest.
Negotiators here in Washington have very little time left to reach a bipartisan agreement and then pass it into law. But with the cost of failures frighteningly high, both sides now working around the clock to strike a deal.
With the June 1st deadline now just 2 weeks away, negotiators are scrambling to raise the nation's debt ceiling and prevent a potentially catastrophic government default. President Biden striking a confident note Wednesday.
The leaders have all agreed we will not default. Every leader has said that.
The president already cutting his trip to Japan and Australia short. He plans to return Sunday to what he hopes will be a bipartisan agreement. Negotiators meeting again overnight and expecting to work through the weekend.
We got to get it done, so we're going to work until we can get it done.
Republicans are demanding caps on future spending, speeding up some energy projects, and the return of unspent pandemic funds. They're also pushing for changes for work requirements for some entitlement programs, including SNAP benefits. The president has left that door open over Democratic objections.
You do not balance the budget on the backs of children and the elderly, and working families, and force kids to go hungry. I mean, that is insane, unacceptable.
Without a deal, a government default could cause interest rates to skyrocket on bonds, credit cards, and some mortgages, according to a White House report, and potentially lead to millions of lost jobs.
Well, with each passing day, the closer we get to the X date, the more damage it's going to do, the more worried investors are going to get, the weaker stock prices are going to become, the higher interest rates are going to go.
Some progressive Democrats have grown so dissatisfied with the contours of this emerging deal that they're urging President Biden to go around Congress entirely and lift the debt ceiling by invoking the 14th Amendment. The president has suggested that's an option that's still on the table, but that it would have to be litigated and wouldn't be a solution to the current crisis.
So now that we've tackled the latest on the debt ceiling, let's take a closer look at President Biden's overseas trip to Asia and the G7 summit and what we can expect. NBC News White House correspondent Mike Memoli joins us now from Hiroshima, Japan, with the latest on that. Mike, good morning. So President Biden has been in Japan for only a few hours now. He's already taken part in his first meeting of the day. Talk to us about his first day in Asia so far.
Yeah, Joe, well, the first order of business for President Biden upon touching down here in Japan was meeting with some of those U.S. and Japanese service members who are based here at a Marine Corps base. The president then went straight to Hiroshima, where he sat down with Japan's Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, really underscoring what the White House says is that Japan is the cornerstone of peace and prosperity in the region. The president praising Kishida for his leadership. Take a listen.
As you said back in January when you were at the White House, I think the quote is, we face one of the most complex environments in recent history, security environments. And I couldn't agree with you more. But I'm proud that the United States and Japan are facing it together. And, you know, we stand up for the shared values, including supporting the brave people of Ukraine as they defend their sovereign territory.
Now, before President Biden touched down on Air Force One here in Japan, he also made an important phone call. He talked to the Prime Minister of Papua New Guinea. Of course, the president cutting short his trip, which included the first ever visit by a U.S. president to Papua New Guinea. The president telling the Prime Minister that he's sending Secretary of State Tony Blinken to represent him at a summit, not just of Papua New Guinea, but other Pacific Island nations. And he also invited the Prime Minister to come to visit him in Washington later this year.
So, Mike, what else is then on the president's agenda over the next few days in Japan before he heads back to D.C. to continue the debt ceiling talks?
Well, at the top of the agenda, as one analyst put it here, is Ukraine, Ukraine, Ukraine. The U.S. has really been key to coordinating sanctions on Russia among the G7 countries, and that's going to be a continued focus. They may even announce some additional sanctions on Russia over their continued invasion. You're also going to see, obviously, the G7 is at its heart an economic alliance, and there's going to be a real focus on improving supply chains. We saw the impact that those COVID-related shutdowns in China had on the global markets, the inability of not just Americans, but people all over the world to get goods, and the economic impact that had. So the leaders are going to be discussing ways in which all of those countries have been working to build their own supply chains to avoid that in the future. You're also going to see not just representatives from the G7, but leaders from other developing countries attending this summit. This is all an effort to show that the U.S. is trying to curb China's influence. They're going to be talking about ways in which G7 countries can help infrastructure and other development in these developing countries as a way of curbing what China has been trying to do, use its economic influence to do the same.
Mike, let's talk more about the relationship between America and Japan. Hiroshima is, of course, where the U.S. dropped a nuclear bomb during World War II. Since then, of course, they've become allies. How important is their relationship on the world stage, especially right now in this moment?
Yeah, we've been talking in American politics for so long about a pivot to Asia. This is an idea that after those forever wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, the U.S. needed to deepen its relationships with Pacific countries like Japan to curb China's growing influence. And really, Japan has been at the heart of that. We saw the president travel to Japan last year, where they announced the Indo-Pacific framework with Japan at its heart. This is a trade alliance of not just Japan, but other countries in the region. We've also seen Prime Minister Kishida leading an important step to enhance Japan's own security arrangement. This country has a pacifist constitution, of course, after World War II, but they're making some revisions in that to improve their self-defense capabilities. That's so important, of course, with North Korea, a regional threat of the first order. And that's one of the things the president has been really most proud of, the efforts by the United States to improve relations between Japan and South Korea as part of that deterrence relationship. Now, of course, it's interesting that Kishida is hosting this G7 summit in Hiroshima. It's not just his hometown, but of course, as you said, the site of that first atomic bomb blast. We're going to see the leaders of the G7 visiting the Peace Memorial on Friday. And that's really an effort to underscore the threat, not just by North Korea, but as we've seen, Russia potentially moving its own nuclear assets to the battlefield near Ukraine, a real concern.
All right. Mike Memoli in Japan. Mike, thank you so much.
Well, even as world leaders prepare to meet and consider new sanctions against Russia to stop the war in Ukraine, its military is stepping up attacks. Overnight explosions rocked cities across Ukraine, including a key port and the capital of Kyiv. That's where NBC News foreign correspondent Molly Hunter is, and she joins us now with the very latest. Hi, Molly. Good morning.
Savannah, Joe, good morning to you. That's right. Another massive countrywide overnight assault here in Kyiv. We heard the explosions, very loud interceptions around 5 a.m. local time. This morning, the Ukraine Air Force says they shot down all but one Russian missile. But guys, when there are interceptions and those explosions, they say more than 25 pieces of fragments of debris fell down on the capital, really causing some damage and starting a warehouse fire.
Overnight, Russia firing at least 30 cruise missiles, Kyiv officials calling the aerial assault unprecedented in power and intensity. In Odessa, one civilian was killed. In Kyiv, falling debris causing damage. It's all part of an intensified Russian military strategy, the 9th major aerial blitz this month. The Russian Defense Ministry claiming it destroyed a U.S.-made Patriot air defense system earlier this week, a high-value target and a vital part of the Ukrainian defense arsenal. Two U.S. officials telling NBC News a Patriot system was damaged but is still operational. Overnight, new satellite imagery showing the destructive toll in the eastern frontline city of Bakhmut, which has seen the fiercest fighting for months. May 2022, and now the scorched earth of May 2023. And this morning, we're also learning more about the former American Green Beret killed in that same area, according to his family. Just months before Nicholas Mamer died, he spoke with NBC's Raf Sanchez while training volunteer soldiers outside of Kyiv.
These are, these people want the exact same thing that your average American wants. They want to, raise a family, enjoy life, have a good quality of life, and have the chance for prosperity, better future for their kids.
His close friend, Ken Koberline, sharing more about the 45-year-old veteran.
Nick was probably one of the most selfless people I've ever met. He is a beautiful, bright light that unfortunately, he's not here anymore.
Now, as the Russian air campaign steps up, at the very top of Ukrainian President Zelensky's wish list is American F-16 fighter jets. Well, overnight, Germany and the UK, both countries, of course, have provided a lot of military aid to Ukraine, have basically said that they will not make a unilateral decision. Any decision about providing jets or even helping to provide jets to Ukraine is going to have to come from the White House. Guys.
And Molly, China's newly appointed special envoy for the Ukraine war just wrapped up a meeting with President Zelensky. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Li Hui. He's the special representative for Eurasia from China. He was actually a former ambassador to Moscow. He is a fluent Russian speaker. Of course, China, a staunch ally of Russia, but he was in town for the last 2 days. We did get a readout last night from both the Ukrainians and the Chinese. The Chinese made sure to say that he did meet with President Zelensky, but the Ukrainians said really all the substantive discussions happened at the foreign minister level. The big message, though, from the Ukrainians is they support and they are certainly open to China being involved in any kind of mediation. Really, though, reiterated the fact that Ukraine would not give up any territory, nor would they stop and cease fire under certain conditions.
All right, Molly Hunter, thank you so much and stay safe.
Montana is now the first state to totally ban the app TikTok. The governor signed a bill into law Wednesday saying he wants to protect people from potential security risks linked to the Chinese-owned app. Now, TikTok and the ACLU are pushing back against the move, saying it violates free speech. NBC News national correspondent Miguel Almaguer has the details.
Montana's new law, which goes into effect next year, is being closely watched by lawmakers as there's now a discussion about a national ban on TikTok. The question now, will it happen?
This morning in Montana, the clock is ticking for TikTok.
So now we're just going to start banning TikTok on a state-by-state basis, huh?
The state becoming the first in the nation to totally ban the wildly popular social media app. Governor Greg Gianforte calling the new law the most decisive action of any state. adding it will protect Montanans' personal and private data from the Chinese Communist Party. TikTok firing back, saying the law infringes on First Amendment rights, promising Montana residents can continue using the app as we continue working to defend the rights of our users. The law would not only make it illegal for TikTok to operate in Montana, but also bans app stores from making it available to download, with possible fines up to $10,000 daily for each violation.
It doesn't criminalize actual users' conduct, it criminalizes the sale. So it targets the app sellers. That might be the App Store, or that might be TikTok itself.
TikTok, with some 150 million American users, is owned by the Chinese company ByteDance. Some critics fear that could give the Chinese government access to sensitive user data or the ability to manipulate what content people see. A claim TikTok CEO strongly disputed in a recent Capitol Hill hearing.
ByteDance is not owned or controlled by the Chinese government. It's a private company.
Still, 46 states have already banned or are working to ban TikTok from state-owned devices and networks, with the U.S. government now prohibiting the video sharing app on all federal devices. Congress has also proposed bipartisan legislation to ban the app. But for now, frustrated influencers in Montana will have to wait to see what happens.
Speaking for my own page in Montana here, I am going to keep posting.
There are questions today over enforcement of this new ban, exactly how that would look. That's still being ironed out in many states, as other states also look to enforce similar bans. Back to you.
All right, Miguel, thank you.
And now let's get a check on your morning news now weather.
Meteorologist Michelle Grossman is back with us. Hey, Michelle.
Hey there, guys. Great to see you. And we are tracking temperature differences from the West Coast to the East Coast. East Coast, we're well below normal for this time of year. And the West Coast continues to sizzle. Then in between, we are tracking a cold front that's moving through. That's bringing the chance for showers, even some heavy rain, some strong storms as we go throughout the later part of today. That would mainly be in Oklahoma, also in Texas in terms of that severe weather. Now, as we look towards the west, we're looking at temperatures once again in the Pacific Northwest into the 80s and 90s, so the heat continues there. The Northeast, we start out with temperatures well below freezing in some spots in the upper 20s, the low 30s, breaking some records there. And we're going to keep it cool throughout the day. Also watching another front that's bringing some heavy rain to portions of the Gulf Coast into the southeast, where you see those brighter colors, especially along the coast. That's where we're expecting the heaviest rain, and that's going to continue over the next couple of days. In the middle of the country, we're looking at severe threat once again. That's going to increase a bit on Friday, up to 17 million people impacted by severe weather tomorrow, the possibility of also some really heavy rain, the chance for hail, some damaging winds, a few tornadoes as well. Notice those record highs continue in the west, so they continue to sizzle, and that will be the story over the next couple of days. We're going to start to moderate a bit in the northeast on Friday. We're going to be still below normal, but just by a couple degrees before we start to moderate into the weekend, and then heavy rain along the Carolinas. Now, by Saturday, you notice this rain stretches. So we're looking at strong storms in the Gulf Coast to the southeast, but this rain stretches up into the northeast. So this is the first day of the weekend, and we're looking at some rain in many parts of the area. We need the rain, but on a weekend, it's not ideal. Looking at heavy rain throughout portions of New England, also rain throughout the southwest. The record highs continue into the Intermountain West as we head towards Saturday, also the Rockies. Sunday, sun-soaked. We love that on a Sunday and the weekend, but we do have scattered showers throughout the Intermountain West. Scattered showers also throughout the southwest, creeping into the southern plains, feeling very summer-like, so that warm air comes back into the Ohio Valley, into the northeast. Temperatures once again into the upper 70s, near 80 degrees in the northeast. Notice that rain lingering still along the Carolina coast into the southeast. So this is set up. We have a cold front that's moving through the middle of the nation. That's going to bring the chance for those storms. Again, we could see some really heavy rain with those storms. Also the chance of some gusty winds and hail. Back to you guys.
All right. Thanks, Michelle. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Coming up on Morning News Now, a grand jury indictment for Brian Kohberger, the man accused of killing 4 University of Idaho students last year, when we could see Kohberger in front of a judge.
Plus, a chaotic car chase for Prince Harry and Meghan Markle here in New York. What we're learning this morning about that run-in with paparazzi that they say could have turned catastrophic. Stick around.
The case against Brian Kohberger is moving closer to trial. Kohberger is accused of stabbing and killing 4 Idaho college students in November. Earlier this week, a grand jury indicted him, which means prosecutors can avoid a preliminary hearing. NBC News Now anchor Gotti Schwartz joins us with the latest developments. Gotti, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Joe. Yeah, this new indictment by a grand jury is going to speed up the timeline on how soon Brian Kohberger could go to trial. It also saves the victims' families from having to hear the case presented more than once. So he's now scheduled to be arraigned on Monday when he's expected to formally enter a plea.
The decision to indict accused killer Brian Kohberger through the grand jury means prosecutors won't have to call witnesses or present evidence in a preliminary hearing. That indictment charging Kohberger with 4 counts of murder in the first degree for the killing of Ethan Chapin, Xana Kernodle, Kaylee Gonzalez, and Maddie Mogan in their shared home.
The family wants to move along. They want to get a conviction and move past this as much as you can move past a case like this.
Kaylee and Maddie, who were killed just months before they would have graduated, receiving posthumous degrees last week. Meanwhile, prosecutors say they have given Kohberger's defense team thousands of pages of discovery, including some 10,000 photos, 9,200 tips, and 51 terabytes of video, audio, and digital materials.
Police department search warrant, come to the door!
The night Kohberger was arrested at his parents' Pennsylvania home, officers in Washington state served a search warrant at his apartment less than 20 minutes from the crime scene.
Show yourself! We have a search warrant for the building!
There, they recovered a wide variety of potential evidence, including a chemical-resistant black glove, multiple hair strands, and possible animal hair cuttings.
I think you know why I stopped you. You ran the red light.
What actually happened was I was stuck in the middle of the intersection.
His white Hyundai Elantra, seen driving here during a routine traffic stop, was also allegedly caught on camera near the crime scene on the night of the killings. Kohberger has yet to enter a plea, but his previous attorney said he believes he'll be exonerated. Once a plea is entered, the state has 60 days to give notice if they plan to seek the death penalty. Meanwhile, an upcoming Dateline special has exclusive new details about the investigation.
If this does turn out to be a death penalty case, how long do you think it'll be before Brian Kohberger actually goes on trial?
It's really hard to put a finger on that, but I'd be surprised if anything happened in terms of trial before the latter part of 2024, frankly.
Now, even in these newly unsealed court documents, the biggest mystery in this case remains. There is nothing in there to suggest why the alleged killer specifically targeted any of the victims. It's also not clear if prosecutors think Kohberger had met any of the victims before the night they were killed. Joe,
all right, Gotti, thank you so much.
Well, turning now to a frightening moment for the royal family. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle were pursued by paparazzi after leaving an award ceremony in New York City on Tuesday night.
A spokesperson for the Duke and Duchess of Sussex say the incident could have resulted in a catastrophic outcome. NBC News senior national correspondent Stephanie Gosk has the latest.
Hey there, Harry and Meghan had just left an award ceremony here in Manhattan. According to 2 senior law enforcement officials, the couple was spending the night at someone's home in the city and did not want the press to follow them. But they were followed. As for what happened after that, there are different stories. Harry and Meghan walked out of a charity event in Manhattan to a sea of cameras with security at their side. According to a spokesperson for the Duke and Duchess, a, quote, near catastrophic car chase ensued, adding highly aggressive paparazzi pursued the couple and Meghan's mother for over 2 hours, all over Manhattan, resulting in multiple near collisions with other drivers, pedestrians, and 2 NYPD officers. Mayor Eric Adams called the media irresponsible.
It would be horrific to lose an innocent bystander during a chase like this, and something to have happened to them as well.
But the mayor cast doubt on some of the details.
I would find it hard to believe that there was a 2-hour high-speed chase.
A statement from the NYPD went further, calling the incident challenging, but said there were no reported collisions, summonses, injuries, or arrests. According to 3 senior law enforcement sources, there was not a chase, but they were being followed. 2 other sources saying the incident was a bit chaotic, that the NYPD was escorting the Duke and Duchess, and the pursuit lasted an hour and 15 minutes. At one point, Harry and Meghan got into a yellow taxi at a police station, the driver downplaying being followed.
With me, it was chaotic, but not crazy. They seem worried. They seem worried and nervous as well.
The driver says he took Harry and Meghan back to the police station where the couple got into another car. The paparazzi have denied using aggressive driving tactics during the incident. Despite the differing accounts, the incident triggering memories of Princess Diana's death in a Paris tunnel, the tragedy that shaped much of Harry's life. Fury with the media has built up over decades. Harry drawing parallels between what his mother experienced and the way Meghan has been treated.
The clicking of cameras and the flashes of cameras makes my blood boil. It makes me angry. It takes me back to what happened to my mum and what I experienced when I was a kid.
The relentless media attention, at least part of the reason the couple says they stepped down from royal duties and moved to the U.S. But they've pursued a number of public projects here, including interviews, that Netflix documentary, and Harry's recent high-profile book release. Back in the UK, Prince Harry has been fighting to get his royal security detail reinstated, which included police protection. His security was downgraded when he stepped back from royal duties, but that would not have affected the level of security he and Meghan get here in the U.S. Back to you.
All right, Stephanie, thank you so much.
International headlines now, when Ecuador's president is calling for new elections as he faces possible impeachment.
NBC News correspondent Josh Letterman joins us now from London with more. Hey, Josh.
Hey, Savannah, that's right. Conservative Ecuadorian leader Guillermo Lasso had been facing an impeachment vote as well as calls for his resignation. And so now he has dissolved parliament and triggered new elections in that country, which is known as the nuclear option in Ecuador's constitution. And so those snap elections will happen within 3 months. He says it's to resolve the country's political crisis, but the move also allows Lasso to rule by decree until the new elections are held. And now to China, where President Xi Jinping is rolling out the welcome mat for Central Asian nations this week for a first-of-its-kind regional summit. Chinese state media say Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan will all be there. What's interesting about this is those are all countries that have traditionally been in Russia's orbit, but where Beijing is really trying to expand its influence while Moscow is distracted by its war in Ukraine. And finally, to Abu Dhabi, where a Canadian walrus named Smooshy has found a new home nearly 7,000 miles away. Smooshy has been at the center of a decade-long fight by a former animal trainer to free the walrus from a Canadian theme park that has faced allegations over the years of mistreating animals. The former trainer bonded with Smooshy after she arrived in Canada as a calf in 2004. Smooshy's new home at SeaWorld Abu Dhabi is set to open later this month. Who knew there even was a SeaWorld in Abu Dhabi?
Right, and Smooshy, by the way, is a great walrus name.
Oh,
you want a walrus now, don't you?
Yeah, the kiss. Oh, who knew they could form, forget SeaWorld, who knew they could form that kind of connection? Oh,
very good. Josh.
Surprisingly very cute.
Thank you, Josh. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Well, coming up, it's Mental Health Action Day. After the break, we're going to focus on the mental well-being of the LGBTQ community.
And as Florida Governor Ron DeSantis expands the state's controversial so-called Don't Say Gay law, now perhaps more than ever, a community is vital. That conversation and more next.
Welcome back. Well, Mental Health Action Day is on a mission to shift mental health culture from awareness to action.
So this morning, we are taking an in-depth look at the impact of mental health issues. One group that has been especially vulnerable to mental health challenges is the LGBTQ+ community. The Trevor Project says a majority of virtually all LGBTQ youth had experienced symptoms of either anxiety or depression, with LGBTQ youth being more than 4 times as likely to attempt suicide than their peers. Let's bring in our 2 experts to discuss the mental health of the LGBTQ community. We have psychologist Dr. Gregory Cason and Juan Acosta, an LGBTQ+ activist and mental health advocate. Thank you both for joining us for this important conversation. Dr. Cason, let's start with you. You specialize in treating gay men. What are some of the biggest mental health challenges that you are seeing with your clients right now? Are you noticing any trends at all?
Yeah, we've actually been seeing trends going up over the past few years. It hasn't just been recently, but over the last few years, we've seen increased depression, anxiety, and definitely substance abuse. And we saw this even before the pandemic, as well as an escalation in suicide, so much so that before the pandemic, I became very concerned about middle-aged suicide that was happening. So we've been seeing this trend gradually escalate.
Juan, you can attest to some of the points I think Dr. Quezon is touching on. You are both an immigrant, also a member of the LGBTQ plus community. Walk us through how your experience in both these worlds has impacted your mental health and what you do to stay healthy.
Yes, thank you. I mean, being part of both communities has impacted my mental well-being tremendously, and it was kind of the catalyst of me doing this work. I felt really alienated at times because there was many barriers and boundaries to care that I did not know how to navigate. And it's something that many other people face when they have intersectionality as a part of their life. And it's something that we should be discussing. I try and take care of myself by connecting with other like-minded individuals, with other peers who have also been through similar things, and receive support in that way.
That community is so important. We're going to talk more about that community in just a moment. Dr. Quezon, I mean, earlier this morning, we talked about 4 anti-LGBTQ bills that Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed into law yesterday. We're seeing all sorts of bans across the country that impact and limit LGBTQ plus rights. Talk about the impact of that. I mean, even just the rhetoric surrounding some of these political debates, the debates themselves, are they having an impact on people's mental health, especially young people?
Not only is this having an impact, this may be a primary reason that we're seeing increased mental health disorders right now in the LGBT community. Realize that we've got people who feel separated from their community already just by virtue of being how they are born. Now they're being told by people outside of them, people in legislature, politicians, church groups, et cetera, that they not only do not belong, but they are wrong for being who they are, and thus they need to be taken away from curriculum. So when we look at kids who are, finding their own identity, which is when you do it, you don't do it after you turn 18. You do it as you're growing up. You realize you are the man, woman, or other that you are. You look inside and you see that this is who I am. And then you start to see a world that is not accepting you, especially if it is your state, such as Florida or Kentucky or one of these other states. Even Texas yesterday just passed a law to ban gender-affirming care for people under 18. And this is just happening all around the nation. You're continually being told that you do not belong, which only escalates mental health disorders and will increase suicide rates across the board.
We want to focus on action today. So, Juan, you talked about community and how important that is to helping with mental health. Talk about how important community is to you and how you go about building that community.
Yes, of course. Leaders shouldn't be making it harder for young people to live. Young people deserve safe spaces to grow up and to live in. And by that, I don't mean just putting up a poster with rainbows and butterflies in a room that states this is a safe space. Something I was able to contribute to was I drafted a historic LGBTQ plus proclamation for the hometown I grew up in that passed for the first time in the town's history. It's something that we all could do in our communities. We can start locally in ensuring that we are creating an environment for young LGBTQ plus people, for all community members to feel not just accepted, but affirmed for who they are.
Dr. Quezon, quickly, I want to mention the 2023 Trevor Project report found 56% of young LGBTQ people who wanted help with their mental health couldn't find it. What are the best ways to find those resources?
Incredibly important statistic. Also, what they didn't say is it takes on average 11 years for young people to go from realizing they have a mental health disorder to actually receiving help for a mental health disorder. So it's not easy. You've got to turn to somebody you can trust. And that sometimes is your parents and sometimes is not. It sometimes is a school official. And as we're seeing right now, sometimes that's not. There is a suicide hotline that's nationwide that's very important to talk about, which is 988. And if they dial 988, that can connect them around to a suicide hotline. There's also the Trevor Project, which you talked about, which does offer connection to mental health all over the nation. But unfortunately, people in rural communities or disconnected communities or disaffected communities, they aren't going to have readily available help, or if there is not help within their family, they may not receive that support. Also, if there are not books for them to read or groups for them to reach out to, that's going to have them feel more isolated. They can look on social media, but social media is also a cause of a lot of the disconnection and loneliness and comparison traps that cause a lot of mental disorders and have been worsening things. So I want to say that there's just a clean solution, but we're still not there yet. So we've still got to work on improving our world to create connections for young people across the nation.
We're thankful for the work that both of you are doing, Dr. Quezon and Juan Acosta. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Well, one of the best-known young advocates for mental health is the singer and actress Demi Lovato, and she is someone who has been very vocal and open about her own struggles. She recently posted this photo of herself on Instagram crying, and she wrote, "Not every day is a good day, and that's okay," including, as you can see there, the hashtag for Mental Health Awareness Month. Well, I had the chance to speak with Demi recently at the Milken Institute Global Conference about the pressures of social media and the role it plays in our country's mental health crisis.
I think it's so damaging. I think that we live in a world of editing and Facetune and all these things that can change the way that we look. It's hard to decipher what's reality and what's not. When you're looking at images of people with perfect bodies and, you know, the illusion of perfection, you start to look at yourself and you start to pick yourself apart. And it's hard to grow up in a world where that's right in front of your face and at your fingertips at all times. It's terrifying and very scary to think of what people are growing up with. I grew up with Zanga and MySpace and images of people who were in this public eye. The editing wasn't there, but we lived in a world where body image was heavily focused on. You know, I grew up in a period of time where young Hollywood was very, very, very thin, and that was the look. And I think that had a really negative impact on my mental health, which I think fed into my eating disorder.
Well, these days, Lovato says that she is generally in a good place, but no matter how happy she might feel or seem, she realizes she is human and it's okay to struggle, which is so important. Well, for more on what we can do here, we have I'm just so grateful that you're with us today. Dr. Kathleen Ethier is joining us. She is the director of the Division of Adolescent and School Health at the CDC, and someone that I have so enjoyed learning from and having these conversations with over the past few months. Dr. Ethier, thank you for joining us on Mental Health Action Day. We appreciate your time this morning.
Hi, Savannah. Happy to see you again.
It's so good to have you with us. Let's start with social media. I mean, we have talked about this, and just to be real, it makes it so hard. I cannot imagine growing up with the prevalence of social media, the totally reliant on it, having the smartphone in your hand. I mean, the role in mental health that Demi Lovato was just talking about, their apps like Instagram playing this huge part in the lives of young people. What do you think about that? How much of the problem we are seeing, because we are seeing a crisis here. We are seeing the stats show that young people are not doing well. How much is social media contributing to that? And is there a healthy way to use it?
I think we have to acknowledge that social media has both benefits and risks. So as Demi pointed out, the comparison, everybody looks like they're having a wonderful time. Everybody looks great. And those kinds of comparisons are absolutely having a damaging effect on young people's body image, their sense of themselves. At the same time, social media really affords an important sense of connection. So, you know, for young people, for instance, in rural areas who don't have connection to others like them. So for LGBTQ youth who may not have a sense of community around them. And also during the pandemic, we learned that sense of connectivity, the social media is an important way to do that. So figuring out how to keep the good and how to ameliorate some of the bad is just really the challenge of our age right now.
What do you think it is that is happening to young people? You said something that has stuck with me. Every time I talk to you, I bring this up, but especially when we talked about girls and how the stats are so much worse with them. You said there's such an important conversation to be having, but the question is not what's wrong with our girls. It's what's happening to them.
Yes.
What is happening to young people? Why are we seeing this mental health crisis?
I mean, I think, as we've discussed, there's probably biology, there's probably psychology, but the place where we can have the most impact is in the social environments of young people. We focus a lot on schools. I am very concerned about the fact that such an increasing proportion of young people say that they're not going to school because they're worried about their safety. And we see that increase particularly among girls and among LGBTQ plus youth. The experience of violence, so the increases that we've been seeing in sexual violence for girls, those experiences and that lack of sense of safety, I think really has an impact on mental health. The experiences of trauma have an impact on mental health. So whatever we can do to make the social environments safer and more supportive for young people, the better they will do. We know a lot about how to make school environments feel safer and how to have young people feel more engaged and more connected. And when schools do that, what our research shows is that young people do better. They feel better, they do better. And particularly for LGBTQ plus youth, the more inclusive we make our schools, the better they do. And what's really interesting is that when we make schools more inclusive for the most vulnerable youth, everyone does better.
Let's talk about how to help. And I know we talk so much, which is so important, about the conversation of talking about it, but obviously that can be difficult to do, maybe especially for young people, maybe especially for young people with their parents who might not have an understanding of mental health or maybe grew up with a stigma around it. We just heard a moment ago, Dr. Quezon in our segment before mentioned sometimes it's not a parent, sometimes it's a school official. You are involved with this youth risk behavior study that the CDC puts out that includes recommendations. What can be done to help young people to get the conversation going in a real way? Like, not just in a way where a parent's going to feel uncomfortable or a child's going to feel uncomfortable. How can this really happen?
Well, I think, first of all, for parents of younger children, our data is on high school students, but for parents of younger children, start talking about mental health early. Talk about feelings, talk about emotions so that you are used to it, that it is part of your regular ongoing conversations in your family. I feel happy. I feel sad. Okay, what do we do about that? What do we do with those emotions? So starting that conversation early is really important. I know that this is an uncomfortable topic for families, but the more connected you can be around these issues, around all issues, the more supported young people are going to feel. But also in their communities and in their environments, what our research shows is that just having a single supportive adult does a world of good. And so having that sense of support, whether it is inside your home or outside your home, goes such a long way to improving mental health for young people.
Be the trusted adult if you are an adult listening. Listen, listen, listen. Finally, for somebody who is listening, who is dealing with issues, or they are trying to help a friend, a loved one, a family member, a child, what kind of resources are available?
Please, please, please reach out. 988 is, of course, an exceptional resource. We have resources on our website to try to help and for schools to create safer and more supportive environments. But also, if you are a parent, use your phone, use that social media, reach out to other parents, talk to whatever resources you can find, and talk to your kids' schools about what's resources they have available. The more connected we are, the better we're all going to do.
Dr. Kathleen Ethier, such an important conversation. Thank you for always answering my call to have this conversation. We very much appreciate having you here, part of our Mental Health Action Day coverage. It's so good to see you.
Thank you so much.
And we want to reiterate that number just one more time. If you or anyone you know is struggling, you can use this if you are struggling or if you are helping someone who is. Call or text 988.
So grateful for all the experts who joined us this morning. Coming up, stealing secrets.
We'll have more on the former Apple employee at large this morning accused of taking trade secrets to China. This is Morning News Now.
The FBI says an ex-Apple employee took the tech giant's self-driving car trade secrets back to China.
The U.S. government is concerned that Beijing is using various tactics to steal proprietary information from American companies. NBC News correspondent Dana Griffin has the details.
A former Apple employee charged with stealing trade secrets for self-driving cars, then fleeing to China, and he's still at large. This YouTube video appears to show the man testing a Jidu self-driving vehicle. He's named in the video as the head of autonomous driving at the Chinese electric vehicle company.
Stealing software and hardware source code from U.S. tech companies in order to market it to Chinese competitors.
According to the newly unsealed indictment, 35-year-old Wei Bao Wang was hired by Apple in 2016 and attended secrecy training for the project he was working on. Then, nearly 2 years after gaining access to Apple's highly sensitive materials, he accepted a U.S.-based job with an unnamed Chinese company, but didn't resign from Apple until 4 months later, the indictment says. Baidu, the massive Chinese internet company that owns Jidu, did not respond to our request for comment. According to the indictment, law enforcement executed a search warrant at Wang's Mountain View, California home in June of 2018.
Among the materials discovered from the devices in Wang's home was the source code for Apple's entire autonomous systems project as it existed around the time that Wang left Apple.
Open the door, FBI, open up. If you don't open up the door, we will.
This Bay Area family remembers that day Wang's home was raided.
So we ran to the peephole, and I could see all the way up these stairs, just FBI agents all in full gear.
Wang was home during the raid, according to the indictment, but managed to board a one-way flight from San Francisco to China later that same night. The DOJ did not comment on Wang's current location, but confirmed he is not in custody.
You'll never be able to stop this kind of thing from happening 100%. Even with Big Brother, you know, with all kind of key logging software, even a photo can get around key logging software. If I took a picture of some source code, that is not typing anything into my keyboard. There's always a workaround.
Wang's indictment is just one of 5 announced Tuesday by the DOJ's newly formed Disruptive Technology Task Force.
We stand vigilant in enforcing U.S. laws to stop the flow of sensitive technologies to our foreign adversaries.
Apple has not responded to NBC's request for comment. U.S. companies now on high alert as the government fights an emerging threat.
Our thanks to Dana for that report. And this issue is bigger than this one person. There are 2 other former Apple employees from China accused of stealing trade secrets. One pleaded guilty in August. Another is also facing charges, but a trial date for his case is yet to be set.
Coming up, it is a classroom sensation that's sweeping the nation, and it might come as a surprise.
Yeah, I don't know if you're going to guess this one. Chess. There it is. Yes, chess is exploding in popularity in high schools. How did something so historically kind of uncool become, well, cool? We will take a look next. We are ending this hour with a classic game that's seeing a surge in popularity. We are talking chess.
Yeah, it is sweeping high schools and becoming one of the most downloaded games in the App Store. NBC News correspondent Jacob Soboroff takes a look.
All right, here's the deal. Spoiler alert, I got my butt kicked. I am still living it down. The kids are so crazy about chess, not just in person, but also online, where this game is absolutely surging in popularity. When the lunch bell rings at Culver High School, the games begin. Chess, that is. Dozens of students cramming around boards in Craig Wisner's ceramics classroom, ready to face off. The Culver High School Chess Club has skyrocketed in popularity, doubling in size this year to 80 members.
From the pandemic, we had to find new ways to play with each other. When school came back, the chess club people wanted to play over the board now.
An explosion of interest in a game that was once anything but cool.
You moved the piece.
I did not move the piece. I adjusted the piece.
Deadly serious.
Check.
And sometimes deadly slow.
My Social Security will expire. You'll still be sitting there.
But I learned quickly that this isn't your grandpa's chess club.
Oh, snap.
And I needed a little help plotting my next move.
D2. D2. Somebody talk to me. If you think going on national television is nerve-wracking, try playing chess against a 16-year-old who's playing since he was in kindergarten.
The chess craze is happening not just in classrooms and living rooms, but on virtual chessboards as online gaming takes over. The number of daily visitors to the website chess.com soared when the COVID-19 pandemic began.
Start your clock.
Later in 2020, Netflix's The Queen's Gambit told the story of an orphaned chess prodigy and became a runaway hit.
We thought that was going to be the peak of chess, and it turns out it wasn't.
In 2023, an even bigger wave of interest in online chess, from 5.5 million daily users last November to more than 12 million today. The Chess.com app became the #1 most downloaded game in Apple's store in February, thanks in part to some newly famous faces drawing in new players, like Alexandra and Andrea Botez, sisters who grew up competing in in-person tournaments, now two of the most popular chess streamers thanks to that pandemic surge.
I had played chess all my life, and this was the first time ever it was becoming more mainstream popular.
They've racked up over 1 million YouTube subscribers and as many more on the streaming platform Twitch, where they broadcast their games live for hours a day.
The beat's just too good. When I'm winning at chess, it is the best feeling. But of course, when you lose, let's not talk about that one.
Chess.com CEO Eric Albest says it's been a deliberate gambit to change our idea of who can play chess. His answer? Anyone.
We all lose our queens. We all play bad chess. But that's just part of the game.
Albest says they're seeing growing numbers of women picking up chess. And the Botez sisters say they hope to inspire more. At Culver High, still a boys' club on the day we visited, they're hoping to keep bringing in new players. They built a strong community, and anyone is welcome at the board, says their advisor, Craig Wisner.
I've seen a lot of kids that came in here quite quiet, quite isolated, quite shy, that form a lot of really powerful friendships and relationships with the other kids in the club.
It's a lot more than just the pieces on the board.
Absolutely.
Ah! Comforting words when you've just been whooped by a high school junior in this ancient game, now all the rage again.
Nice job, dude.
These kids are so talented, not to make excuses for myself, by the way. Ian, who played against me, actually has a so-called ELO rating of 2,000. That makes him an expert chess player. He is aspiring to become a grandmaster. Back to you.
Wow.
What would our ratings be?
Thank you.
Like,
I mean,
-4.
I couldn't even get started, I don't think. People live streaming themselves playing chess.
That's
wow.
incredible.
It really is.
Very cool. Jacob, thank you for that. That does it for this hour of Morning News Now.
But the news, of course, continues right now. Stay with us.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.